Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nikki from MRDC Software, and I have Phil here with me. We will be starting to discuss the social listening, understanding the process. You can ask questions on the Q&A box, and we will answer it after the discussion that we have today. Good morning, everyone, and I'll pass it to Phil now. Thank you.
Right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this, I think it's our 7th or 8th in our Kwiklearn series. This week we're looking at social listening and understanding the process and perhaps going a little bit wider than that and to explain what it is that we offer with our social listening platform, just so that you can get a feel for that and compare it perhaps to other social listening platforms that are out there. So really appreciate your attendance today. We're in difficult times, and I hope you're all out there, you're all surviving and managing what's obviously a very difficult time for pretty much everybody. So let's make a start on this webinar. And what we're going to cover in today's webinar is, first of all, for those who are new to social listening, I'm just going to spend a very brief moment explaining what it is, just to perhaps make some clarity to that. Look at some of the reasons why we carry out social listening studies, how they're perhaps a bit different from traditional market research, and then look at some perhaps one of the big issues with social listening, and in some ways it's given it in some circles it's giving it a bad name. It's to look at the quality of data that you get when you buy, if you like, a social listening project, and that's something I feel quite strongly about. I want to sort of spend a bit of time on today to talk about what you should look for when it comes to quality of data. A little bit of time on what you can do with that data, and perhaps just some thinking as well, rather than perhaps going too deep into the topic of integrating that data with other data that you might have from other research projects or other business data that your client has that you want to perhaps integrate and show alongside what you're achieving with your social listening projects. So let's just take a step back, and this of course is the figures here are all pre-COVID, so COVID-19, but this is data that came from the 2019 SMR report, and that report in it covered the volume of business that's covered worldwide, and traditional market research currently accounts for $47 billion of business worldwide. And if you include data analytics and insights, so sort of going outside what we might call traditional market research, it goes up to not quite double, but certainly significantly to 80. And if you look at the data, what the growth shows, and of course this does vary for each country is showing different growth, or in some cases negative growth, but market research is sort of pretty much sort of sitting up here and keeping it quite a steady sort of straight line, and most of the growth that you're finding is in data analytics and insights, of which social listening is quite a big part. So the growth up that is very much in that area, and social listening is becoming more and more important as a tool, if you like, for producing research data. And this growth, of course, is all this growth in these figures here, or the difference between these figures here, is really in the fact that unsolicited data is growing, perhaps unlike typical question and answer research, where we traditionally have a questionnaire, we ask a question and we get an answer. So this business is changing, and I think it's important to be there to be on the front of that. So what is social listening in simple terms? We're going to go through it in a reasonable amount of detail this morning. It's collecting unsolicited data from social media. That's what it is. It's taking that data that's out there, that's in the public arena, so that you can take that data and analyze it. And that data is analyzed using artificial intelligence, using text analytics systems. So this is a fairly fast developing technology that we're right at the front of with this tool, that we're able to garner data that's available in the public domain, process that text and deliver results. So it's another form of research. You're actually using unsolicited data to convert that into results and research analysis. And why do we carry out social listening research? One of our clients actually just described it as having the finger on the pulse, in that if you do market research, it tends to be a snapshot in time. Yes, we do tracking studies, but they're just multiple snapshots in time. Social listening is something that's just completely continuous. It can go on all the time. You can even look down to the week or the day even to see what effect different stimuli are having. So if a new advertising campaign goes out in different countries on different dates, for example, you could monitor that and see what effect that's having, and see whether it's having a positive or negative impact on people through social media. So it's a way of having a finger on the pulse that you just don't get with most tracking studies. Now, you do get it with some sort of customer feedback type studies, where you're perhaps asking every customer every day of the week, you're getting some data back. But most research is done as either multiple snapshots or a snapshot. And it means you can continuously monitor brands and competitors, your own brand and competitors, to see whether there's generally positivity and negativity, and to sort of see whether different things are coming up. It's faster moving research, if you will, and it means that you can have, again, that finger on the pulse to see whether new things are coming up, whether new problems are arising, new things that need to be addressed with marketing or whatever else it might be, or in product presentation. So it's a way of detecting, perhaps a little bit more subtly than sometimes market research does. And another thing it can do that market research finds hard, except in qualitative research, is capturing emotion and feelings. Now, again, that's something that's not available in most social listening platforms, but is available now, one where you can capture emotion and feelings so that you can report that and see what sort of reaction you're getting from people. And we'll look at an example of that as we go a bit further into the presentation. And the question I ask is, have you ever had to present data looking like this, where you've done a quarterly quantitative tracking study, and nothing really happens? You go to a presentation, you turn up with this slide, and the best you can do is say, well, at this quarter here, they stretched apart these two brands by 2 or 3%. One went up by 1.5%, and one went down by 2%, or something like that. But this is not uncommon, particularly in developed markets. I know in markets maybe like insurance, banking, where brands don't tend to change very quickly, that sort of data is difficult to present because it's not showing you much. And of course, the time points at which you're delivering that data, or collecting that data and delivering the results, are fixed. They're every quarter, and so the data tends to sort of have these lines that go down and up, but very, very gently, and really doesn't show you very much. With social listening, you can get something quite different. So if we take a little while to look at this chart, the top chart is Net Promoter Score coming from a typical market research survey. This is actually real data that was used. It's anonymized, so you don't know what it is, unfortunately, because I can't reveal that, but it is real data. And if we look at the red line there, that was the monthly figures that were coming up as Net Promoter Score. So there was some movement, dropping down a little bit here and then recovering towards the end of 2019. And the yellow line up the top here is the 3-monthly roll-up. So that would be a much more gentle curve. But even that, you can see that the red and yellow lines are pretty much on top of each other, and there really isn't that much to report. Just a little bit here where you can see for this month, the red line did drop 3 points different from the yellow line. So there was something happening that particular month that caused it perhaps to drop, but it's nothing particularly significant to report. Now, with the same information, or the same product rather, the net sentiment score that was produced, and the net sentiment score is the same as the Net Promoter Score in principle, or similar principle, in that it's the negative comments subtracted from the positive comments. And you can see here that there's much more difference. And so if we look at the two lines here, you can see that the mauve line is the monthly roll up. So the mauve line you can see here is relatively smooth, but still shows some changes and actually doesn't vary too much from the research data, the quantitative research data coming from the Net Promoter Score. It's got the same sort of curvature to it. But if we look at the weekly data that's coming out from the net sentiment, that's a much more jagged line. And it's going up and down with a real peak here where it jumped right up from a lower point here. So what you're getting is much more sort of granular data here, and there will be a reason for this. Something would have happened that week to make that figure jump up so much, and something may have been a problem for this gradually to diminish over here. There will be reasons for it that can be explored by going back to the tweets or whatever it was that were causing this. And if you're thinking this is insufficient sample size, I think this particular data here over the year came from something like 1 million posts. So we're not talking about volatility due to small samples. That'd be more true up here. If anything, we're talking about real changes in perceptions and real things that people were talking about on social media as a result of a brand's activity. So a more detailed picture comes out and painting a rather more interesting story that can be delved into to look at why that was, so that maybe this general drop here can be avoided next time. Maybe there was some reason for that dropping between June and July. So what do you get from a social listening project that we handle? Now, not all social listening platforms are the same. Some just come out with a positive versus negative score, and they're done very crudely. Our platform does come out with a score for positive, neutral, and negative sentiment. That is data that's produced from the analysis. You'll also get a topic analysis as well, so that you could get, just like any other quantitative data, you can get the percentage of people talking about each topic. And if it's appropriate, there might be subtopics that are associated with those topics, so that you effectively got to drill down into what topics people are talking about. Emotion analysis is something that comes out. It's not possible from posts to get an emotion from every post. Many posts are just statements, but where emotion can be detected, we can categorize that into 14 different emotions that vary from hate and all sorts of things up to the more positive emotions. And we'll look at a little bit of data that we produced on that a little bit further on into this session. Emotion is an optional thing that you can have or not have. Typically, you find that about half of posts can have their emotion automatically generated from the content of the post. That will vary from product field to product field. Some product fields there is less emotion. In some product field there's a lot more joy and so on knocking about, because or luxury products, for example, there's a lot more emotion that's detectable from people's posts. You also get access to individual posts as well. So if you want to really get some nice quotes for presentations or something like that, with our system, you can just drill down back into an individual post to see exactly what someone said. It's not just coded up data that you get here, or some scores or anything that's not checkable, if you like, but not verify. You can't verify or go back and explore in absolute depth if you want to. You can drill down into individual posts. So if you find that from a new advertising campaign, for example, there's a lot of people that actually hate it, you could drill down into the post to see what it is they hate about it. And it might be the same thing, it might be different things, it might be interpretation of the message. You can go into it and look at those posts and see what they are. And as a further sort of side benefit sometimes, and I know some clients who have used this, by going into those individual posts, They're open forums of these things like Twitter. You can engage with these people if you wish to. You might want to recruit them for an online community, but you can actually engage with them and ask them why they said that brand X gave them or made them, forced them to have this opinion, and actually find out something more in depth. Possibly they may not answer, but you may get something a bit more in depth that you wouldn't normally get. So quite an open system as far as exploring further and having the ability to really get some sort of quite juicy quotes that you can use to use in reporting, or to give examples of issues that people are having, or things, of course, that they're very positive about. So the steps for a social listening study are broken down into these little steps here. So the first thing is to decide what brands you want to measure. Obviously, you would want to measure your client's brand, and we typically measure up to 11 other competitors. If there aren't 11 other competitors or significant competitors, you obviously can choose less than that if it's not relevant. So decide on the brands that you want to measure. What we can do when you've decided on your brands, we can give you a free post estimate to make sure it's viable. So this is perhaps not so important where you're working with big international brands, but if you're working in a smaller sector, maybe you'll want to do some research on a chocolate bar or something like that, where it's got a wide number of competitors, particularly in some countries, but you might find some of those competitors are quite small. You might want to check before you do the research to get a free post estimate, so that we can see whether it's viable to do research for those particular brands. So we can provide that information for you free of charge. You can choose whether you have what we call a generic model or a coded model. Now, a generic model means that we're using language interpretation to read the posts, and using AI to actually codify all of the data. We have models for, I think it's about 20 languages now. I'm going to show a slide on what they are in a minute. We can add to those languages, but if you're using one of the 20 languages we already had coded, you can use the generic model, or we can make a coded model for the product area you're working in within that language. And the difference between those is basically accuracy and cost. The generic model means that we can run a project for $4,000 or $5,000. A coded model means you're probably talking 3 times that price. But again, if you're running a project over many years, it's probably worth getting a coding model just for your brand, so that all of the buzzwords that are appropriate to that business can be coded into the model, whereas the generic model may not have that. With a coded model, the accuracy gets near 90%. With a generic, it's nearer 70% accuracy. Then when we've made that choice, we can harvest the data that's in the public domain. So that's using Twitter, Instagram, anything that's in the public domain on Facebook, walls, any forums, and so on. If we're coding the data, we would code it manually at first. So we would code a selection of the posts and plug that into our model, so that we can then recheck that to make sure that the model is working when we put through another set of posts. And we just keep doing that until we hit that 90% accuracy. When you've done that, you can explore the data. We'll have a little look at that in a while. And when that data is ready and you can either do this yourselves or we can do it for you. There's a platform so that you can go in there and explore and get quantified data, or look, as I said, at individual posts. And you can then plug that data either into Excel, if that's where you're more familiar, or we have a tool to plug it into Tableau, so that you can use the free Tableau reader. There is a cost to plug it into Tableau. It's not not particularly high, but then you can use the free Tableau reader to explore that on your desktop. So choosing the brands is the first step. It's an opportunity when you choose those brands to look at your perhaps traditional competitors, but also perhaps to monitor new competitors. If there's any new kids on the block, you might want to look at them to see how they're developing. We can check to see whether there's enough activity and enough posts going on to make that worthwhile. But if there's a new brand that's coming into the market and you're planning on running a social listening program for a year, I would recommend adding in any new competitors just to see how they're performing and how they're growing. You can also monitor sub-brands, so you can not only monitor perhaps your own brand, but perhaps one or two of the sub-brands within that brand as well, if that's particularly relevant. So we talked a little bit just now about the generic and the coded model. So the generic model, as I said, it comes in 20 languages. If we use the coded model, you would need that if it's outside the generic model. You will get that higher level of accuracy, and it's a recommended route to take if you're planning on a long-term project. If you're just trying to get a sort of dipstick, as it were, of a count at a particular time of what activity is, or you're looking retrospectively at what's been going on in the last 3 or 6 months, the generic model might be all you'd want to get that feel for what's going on social media. These are the languages. I won't read them all out now. We are distributing this presentation within the next 24 hours, I think. So you can just check that afterwards if you want to check this later. But you can see we cover 20 languages in there using the generic model, but we can always add to those, of course, fairly quickly if it's not been done before. So the first step, once you're ready to go ahead and have chosen the brands that it's viable to work on, is to harvest the social media data. So we do that. We obviously pay for that. You have to, at that point, once you start harvesting the data, you've had to have committed to the project. And we collect that data from all the public sources that are available. The steps where we're coding the data are that we would sample data and we would code it for as many of these things as you wanted. You can only code for sentiment if you want to. I would always recommend coding for topic and probably subtopic. You may or may not decide to pay a little bit more to code for emotion, depending on what product area you're working in, and we can advise on that, obviously. We can certainly sample some posts to see whether that's worth doing as well. But they're the things that we can code for. When that coding has been carried out by us, we can plug that into the text analytics model that we have, and then we recheck it with another batch of posts and repeat that process until we hit a minimum of 85% accuracy and usually 90% accuracy. I know we've had clients sort of randomly pick out 20 tweets to make sure they've been coded correctly, and it's something you can actually do with a client if you think they're going to be distrustful of your data. Give them go through 20 of the posts, and you'll be able to see straight away that you've got a high level of accuracy. So let's go on to the next slide. That's it. Once we've collected the data, this is something you can start to do yourself. You get a dashboard where you can play with the data, or you can leave us to do all the work for you. That's a choice that you have and that we can talk about from project to project. There's a little bit of learning up front, but we're happy to teach you how to do that. What the data exploration allows you to do is to use filters on the data. So you could look at, first of all, perhaps the positive responses to see what sort of things are coming up. But there's tools in there so that you can actually codify the data yourself if you want to. And whereas a lot of the very low cost social media platforms fail, is that what they're doing is they're searching for individual words in posts, and the reports you get will be based on words, individual words that are found, and even their positive negative score can be based on positive words, less negative words. Now, this is not a very reliable way of working. The word not, for example, can really cause confusion straight away, but we recommend that you start looking at certainly bigrams, which is 2-word expressions, to explore your data, and trigrams actually even reveal more. So if you're working on a shampoo product or something like that, some of the sorts of trigrams that come out would be conditioning, uh, soft to use, good product, and all those sorts of things. So you'll get some words coming up that would come in trigrams, and it would help you to understand your data, because remember, here you're working with often, if not tens of thousands of posts, hundreds of thousands of posts, even millions sometimes. So exploring the data as groups of 2, 3, and even 4 words gives you a real insight to what messages are coming out of that data, so that it can be coded accurately. The data that you're exploring, you can drop into Excel at any time. You can also link it to Tableau, so that you can browse it in a dashboard and drill down into it. And I'll be showing you that towards the end of this session. And as I said, you can drill back down into individual post season. Increasingly, you can merge other business data, survey data, and business data into reports and dashboards. And that's something that I'm not going to cover in detail now, but our own platform we've launched this year, called the CYS platform, allows you to plug in other business data so that you can produce a dashboard that has perhaps a typical quantitative research project, maybe some sales data for your client, and so on. And all that can be plugged into one dashboard with your social listening data, which means that then your client's got something at their fingertips that gives them all their sources of data in one or more screens, and then they can browse their data through that dashboard. So there's some really sort of fast moving developments that we've got. And indeed, just as a sort of little bit of an advert, I think it's on Wednesday, June the 10th, we're running an hour-long webinar on that very topic of how research is changing and what's possible now with data, which when you get the mail shot soon, I'd ask you to join if that's an area of interest to you. Quality makes a difference. I said I'd come back and talk about quality. Attention to detail in the posts. If we're coding the data, it's important to check it and recheck it and recheck it. Unless you do that, it's not like when perhaps you've code market research questionnaires on an open-ended question where you can take 100 questionnaires from 1,000 respondents, perhaps, or 500 respondents, and your code frame will be pretty much measured. You do need tools when you've got thousands of posts to be able to explore that data, find the trigrams, and code it appropriately. So that attention to detail is really important, and certainly the low-cost systems just don't have that. Noise reduction is really important. One of the worst things that happens with social media data for the systems that are really not up to scratch, in my opinion, is that they just let in any mention of a brand that seems relevant. Now, there are plenty of examples out there where there are similarly named brands or brands that can be mixed up with something completely different. I know famously there's some work on Beck's beer in doing social media research, and someone didn't, I don't think, realise for a while that Beck's is a very well-known footballer who comes from England, where there's a lot of posts about Beck's the footballer, who David Beckham is his full name, but he's known as Beck's. And so all that data had to be excluded. And sometimes we've had projects where half the data has to be thrown away because it's not relevant to the actual brand that you're interested in. So noise reduction is really important. It's very easy to bag together data that doesn't relate to the brand you're interested in just because it's a similar name or has a short name that can be mixed up. And that checking and rechecking that accuracy, particularly in a long-term project, is absolutely essential. Using NLP is important as well. We use natural language processing, so it's not that our system is not a count of positive words versus negative words. Doing things on the individual word count gives you fairly spurious analytics that really aren't very robust. I wouldn't say they're meaningless, but they're certainly very limited in what they're offering you. So this ability to process text responsibly, I would say, is really quite important. So removing similar name brands, removing posts with text confusions really is an important part of the process. And that comes to the fore when you get brands like this. So I mentioned Beck's just now, the beer, and Beck's the footballer. Here's a very good example. If you were researching either of these brands, you would want to make sure that if they were talking about it being smooth and silky, they weren't talking about the soap being smooth and silky. They were perhaps talking about the chocolate taste, and vice versa. You'd need to exclude the post if it was the other way around. And if it wasn't clear, you'd have to exclude that post, because you don't want to include posts that are ambiguous, where you can't tell if there's nothing else in the tweets or the posts that makes it clear whether we're talking about a soap or a chocolate here. You can't use it. If you find the word taste, or we found the word taste, or the AI in there found the word taste, we can assume that not many people eat soap, therefore we're probably talking about chocolate, and it would be appropriate to research on the chocolate brand here. Likewise, if it was kind to the skin, I think we can be pretty safe that we're talking about the soap product if we're researching that product. So that sort of depth of looking at the full post to understand a brand that it's talking about is absolutely crucial. There are 1,000 suppliers of social media analytics out there. I don't know if it's more than that or less than that, but it's about 1,000 suppliers out there. And what it's true to say is it's easy to get it done badly. I've already alluded to this already. And many of these offer quality that's around 40%. That I don't think is good enough really for the market research industry and the insights industry. Getting above that takes effort, costs money, needs the right software, and needs humans. And when you might think we're in a very competitive market, we are in some ways, but that 1,000 whittles down really just to one or two when it comes to getting quality of the level that we're talking about. So I think it's important to understand the difference between something you can get quickly and cheaply to something that perhaps we're offering if you want that accuracy, and what you're not getting if you don't buy that accuracy. So this is a quick look at the Explorer that you get that you can use if you want to. You can see all of the posts that have been sampled. You can browse through those. You can search for different, I talked about bigrams and trigrams. You can look to see whether they're positive sentiments and so on. You can get counts on different things coming up. So you can go into the data and get counts on different topics that are being raised, subtopics that are being raised, even emotions if it's being coded in the data. You can do these sort of searches here, so you can remove anything where there's noise and the sentiment is positive and look at those posts. And if you wanted to, you could drop those into an Excel file, for example. So you can browse your data and look at it and get to learn about it. And if you want to do the whole thing yourself from start to finish, except for the collection of the data, there is a dashboard that lets you do that. You need a bit of training to understand that. You need someone who understands data to work with that, but we can train you to do that, and you can run this all yourself using the Data Explorer, so that you can actually manage the project pretty much from start to finish. Here's an example of where accuracy really did come home to us. This is a real project. I can't name what the project is, but it was something we did for one of our clients, and we reanalyzed some data that they're put through another social media and analytics system. And when we reanalyzed it in the depth that we do, we found that of their 39% of they claimed 39% of posts were positive. When we reanalyzed it, we came up with 88% being positive, 9 being neutral, and 3 negative, which isn't too bad. Of the ones that were neutral, we found that actually 80% were positive. But this was perhaps the scariest thing. Of the 57% they come up with negative, 37% were in fact positive, 7 were neutral, and only just over half of that 57% were actually negative posts. So this produced an automated tool, produced 44% accuracy. On that particular project, we produced 87% accuracy. So real difference there when you come to do this depth of analysis. The emotions I referred to earlier, we code to 14 different emotions ranging from joy right through to fear. Again, this is some live data on a project, and you can see here these are the positive ones here: joy, anticipation, desire, love and trust. And these are the negative ones, which for this particular brand are very low. And this is not untypical, though it does vary from market to market. No emotion was showed by about half here, 51%. Which is a good average, although it does wobble around from product field to product field. And you can get these sort of analytics out. So this is actually just made up data, but you can see here for the client brand, we've got certain product characteristics coming out. For a competitor one, we've got different characteristics, product characteristics coming out as well. Products, merchants came out here, purchasing came out, and value, which didn't come out here. And we got some different topics coming out for competitor two. So this is a typical sort of slide or a bit of information you can provide, a bit of feedback you can provide as topics of conversation for your brand against two other brands. And you can have more brands than that, as I mentioned earlier. And I did also mention that you can integrate this data into our new platform. So you can, in our platform, you can merge data, as many data sources as you want to produce nice looking dashboards like this. So this could merge together social media data with perhaps a quantitative survey that you ran, with perhaps some business information, maybe some sales figures your client has by region, some targets that they have, some other KPIs and so on. So you can put all of this information into one dashboard so that this dashboard can actually be refreshed in real time all through the year. So you can give this as a live dashboard, as it were, that the client can have at their fingertips 24/7 on any device, by the way, I should have said. All right, so we're going to have a quick look at just looking at a dashboard now, or the one that we've got. So I'm just going to switch windows here very quickly, and I'm just going to give you really just a 2-minute introduction to this, just because I think within 2 minutes you'll get a feel for what you can do. So this is something that was plugged into our Listing 24/7 platform for hair care, and just take a second to load up. There it is, loading up. So these were the brands that were tracked, and we can click on one of these brands. You see over here we've got some summary information, so we can see that most of the posts here came from Twitter, but a significant number coming from message boards as well, less so from blogs. And you can see that they were generally positive, but a lot of neutral comments for this. But let's have a look at a particular brand. Now let's look at Tresemme. And that brand, you can see, has done much better because it's got very low negative comments and 23%. So 23.1 against we had just now, which was 17.8. So Tresemme is performing better than most of the others. So that means that that's doing pretty well. Let's drill down a bit further. Let's go into Tresemme again. I could look at the individual sources here to see if they're any different, but let's scroll down here and we can look at the topics that came up. So the main topics were product characteristics, placement, promotion, product usage, emotional connection, and so on. So they're gradually coming down to small and small posts, but as you can see, still significant numbers of posts. Even down here we're getting 6,000 posts that we're analyzing, so significant amounts of data. If we click on product characteristics, you can see here the number of posts go up and down month by month. There was a peak this month, or this quarter, sorry, and it dropped again here. But then we can look at the subtopics here, and so packaging still produced 13,000 posts, so we got a lot of data here still, and there's no third level down. You can code down to 2 sub levels if you want to, but packaging is sort of the end of a line here, so everything that refers to packaging is in here. So 13,000 posts in there. Now I can go back up the tree here, and we could look at another brand now. Let's look at Pantene. And here we've got less coming out. If we look at the posts on boards, I'm clicking here. So they've got a more favorable on boards, but still a lot of neutral comment on boards. Let's take another brand here. I've got Clear. And let's go back to all posts again. I didn't select all posts just now, but I just picked the product ones. There we go. And so we've got a positive image here for Clear. Still reasonable numbers of posts, still 700 odd posts. So still good numbers. And if I wanted to sort of look right back down to the individual posts, let's pick Tresemme. Product characteristics again, it's got the most. Let's pick nourishment. And you can see for nourishment, I'm still working on just under 9,000 posts, so substantial amounts of data. And here I can just click through and view the posts that we've got. So I've got it set up here for top 5. I can change that up here. I could have the top 100 if I wanted to. And the bottom 5, these are based on likes. The share count hasn't been set here for some reason, but this is based on likes. So if we looked at this particular post here, I can drill down on this and you can see it's automatically opening Twitter, and I've got back to here to this person here, and there's their actual post. They've actually given a product characteristic, and that's ended up in the data. And so if I wanted to now, I could perhaps try and recruit this person to a community, or to engage further and ask them a bit more about why they said something. This was rather a statement rather than any opinion, rather than an opinion, this particular tweet that we've got there. But you can see you've got a dashboard here that you can work your way around and explore your data and get to know it. In the space of a couple of hours, you can find out a lot about your the presence of different brands and how you're comparing to different brands. And of course, you can drop this data into Excel at any time if you want to put it into a chart that you can save and use in reports and so on. So that gives you an idea of how you can work around a dashboard with all the data in it. That's something that that comes as part of the package. Let's just quickly go back, and I will take some questions. I can see there's some questions already coming in. So I just want to tell you quickly some differentiators of the platform that we're using here. One of the things that I've stressed enough already, that the accuracy is much higher. We're up to 85% now on most projects, and 90 quite regularly. Noise is significantly reduced. On other vendors, you can find that a high percentage of the data is irrelevant. Topic analysis, you just don't get that with others. Oops, I've screwed. Languages, we cover any language at all. So even if it's not one of those on that 20 that I listed, we can set that up in about 2 weeks for you. We've worked in every language. People often ask us, can we work in some of the languages where there's a lot of nuances? I know Thai is a question that comes up. German, although perhaps is another language where words get put together. Arabic, people think it's a difficult language to work with. All of those languages, we've worked with the accuracy that we claim, and that's been verified by our clients. Emotion detection, yes, we've got a model with 14 emotions that I showed you a quick slide on that. That's not available to others. We can integrate it with other survey data. And the last thing, which I haven't shown you today, but is something that's becoming more and more interesting, is image processing. That we can now, any posts that contain images, we can code that data as well. Its accuracy won't be as high as the text post, but it'll be somewhat more generic, but if it's a picture of two people standing in a bar or eating at a restaurant, it will pick that up to that detail. Pictures now can be recognized with image recognition software that we have. So at that point, I'm going to take a break. I can see some questions come in. I'm going to ask Nikki, perhaps if she could like to work through those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And just to say that you'll get all this presentation and the recording of it, if you want it, within a day or so by email. So if you want to hear any of this again or see any of the slides again, you can get to them without any problem. Nikki, over to
Okay.
you.
All right. Thank you so much, Phil, for that. So I have here a question that this is going to be a newbie question for what does accuracy refer to and how is accuracy check measured?
Okay, so well, accuracy is the accuracy of the data that you're producing. I know I've had this question from some people who have said to me, so you're claiming 85–90% accuracy on what you're reporting. That doesn't sound very good. Our market research usually is 100% accurate. Well, I would challenge that. I would say that if anything is ever 100% accurate, I would have my doubts. What you mean is that the respondents aren't. If the interviewer asks the question correctly, the interviewer correctly, the person being interviewed understood the question correctly and answered it correctly, or didn't check online the wrong answer by mistake. No, nothing is 100% accurate. But I think 90% accuracy, 85–90% accuracy is gives you a particularly given the volumes of data that you've got, typically thousands of record is good and gives you meaningful data. And if you want to check it back, you or your client can do that, because if you give them the dashboard with the tweets like I showed you, I went back to a tweet just now. If your client doesn't believe you've got that accuracy, or if you don't believe you've got that accuracy, go through as many tweets as you want to or posts as you want to and verify for yourself that the text analytics has done the accuracy that we're claiming. And you will find, I guarantee, that you get that accuracy that we're claiming. Most other systems aren't working to that accuracy. If I drew a curve of the accuracy, I said there's 1,000 suppliers out there. The vast majority are down the 40% end here, and they creep up to the 50, and then there's a few at the very tip, of which we're one, that get anywhere near that level of accuracy. So there's very different sorts of results being available, if you like, in the marketplace, and it's important to understand that. But yes, we would expect to get 85–90% accuracy. If we use a generic model where it's just using generic language interpretation, that will come down a bit nearer 70, particularly in markets where there's buzzwords, because buzzwords might have some other meaning in general English, Spanish, Tagalog, whatever it might be. And could be in some cases misinterpreted or not interpreted so well. But even that level of accuracy will give you a good picture or data, is good for a snapshot, and it's far better than the 40% that many of the sort of online systems are offering.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question.
All right. So another question is, will we get the recording? Yes, you will get the recording within 24 to 48 hours or within this week. So we will send that to you. And then other question is, how often do you report on data if you run a project for a year?
Good question. I suppose the answer is as often as you want it. I think it depends. Well, yeah, I suppose every project's different. We have some clients that we report every 3 months to, some every month. It really depends what market you're in. If you're working in a stable market where you don't expect a lot of changes, you might find 3 months enough. I think a monthly is good, because then you got your finger on the pulse, so that if anything unexpected happens in that month, you're there to look at it quickly and deal with it and see that one of the thing that upset a lot of customers was something that went out in the press that perhaps you didn't notice, and that had a really negative effect on your brand, or it had more effect than you perhaps perceived. So maybe there was some negative press out there, and that had more effect on your brand than you expected. So I think monthly is good. It costs a little bit more than quarterly, but I think it'd be well worth doing. But we can provide what you want. We can make that weekly if you wanted to. Probably monthly is enough. Quarterly, I would certainly recommend.
Okay. All right. Another question that we have is, can we monitor noise in the data and ensure the quality stays high?
Yes, you can. As I almost give the same answer to the first question, really. Yes, there's always going to be noise in the data. You'll never reach 100%, but the target is getting around the 90%, and we've seen that. We've done some test projects where we coded more and more data manually to check it against what the AI model is doing. And you see it got to go up and up and up till it gets to 85, 90, and then it really flattens out. And the more you do, the benefit perhaps might creep to 90.1 to 90.2 or something like that, and it just doesn't become viable. And that's by perhaps coding manually 1,000 different more answers or something. But you can check that back at any time. So if you want to look at what's going on, you can go back to the individual posts. I think it's quite a convincing thing to do in front of a client. If you sit with a client and go through 50 posts, your chances of being able to demonstrate 85 to 90% accuracy are incredibly high. You'd be very unlucky if you happen to pick 50 posts that happened to be 50 that fell into the 10% that were not correct. We're probably ending up in neutral when they perhaps should have been positive or negative. So it's very reliable data that you're getting, and it's very provable to clients that what you're getting. And I know clients have been overly surprised by how accurate it is rather than the other way around. So accuracy is not a problem, and it's something that we really put a value on, and I think is valuable to you too.
Okay. All right. Great. Now, one last question I have here is, can we handle any language, for example, Chinese or Arabic, something like that?
Yep, I did list the languages. That'll come out in the slide deck that we send to you. We've got 20 languages already set up. If there's any other languages that you want, we can plug them in usually within about 2 weeks. So that's not a problem, but we've had no problem. And I think I said in the presentation towards the end, perhaps after that question was posted, I think people cite the most complex languages as being languages like Thai, German, Arabic, and I think Chinese as well. And we've worked successfully with all of those, hitting the levels of accuracy that we're claiming. So if you have a project in that field, in those languages, and you're concerned, we'll hopefully be able to find you a reference who can confirm that the accuracy we're claiming is actually achievable. So yes, any language we've had, there's no language that we've actually failed in, if you like, or is so problematic that we can't handle it for you.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyway, another question here is about the experience. Can you tell us a bit about the experience in doing healthcare studies, if we have?
Sorry, Nikki, the line crackled just as you asked that question. Could you ask it again?
All right. Can you tell us a bit about your experiences in doing healthcare-related studies, if any?
I'm not the expert in healthcare. I can get someone to talk about that because we have done quite a lot of work in the healthcare sector. Maybe Nikki, you could make sure you know who that is, and we can make contact afterwards. But yes, we're happy to share. I'm pretty sure we've got some data in the healthcare sector that we can show you. I don't know what country it is off the top of my head. but we can certainly fix that up offline, and yeah, we'll get back to you with somebody I know who's an expert in that particular field, rather than me give a sort of rather generic answer or general answer here. That's not my area, particularly that sector. So yes, please make contact with us, and Nikki, perhaps you can note the person there and follow that one, and we'll get you some information on that and give you some advice.
All right, so it's actually anonymous attendee, so I'll be sending in my email address so that you can email me as well. All
Okay.
right, and then another one I have here, I think it's the last one. The client can decide which markets to track. This will affect cost.
Yeah, so perhaps I didn't make that clear enough. I mean, typically you track a particular market, and then you pick the brands within that market that you want to track. So you might say, I want to track, well, let's pick the example we saw during the presentation, the shampoo market. So you would pick, if your brand was Tresemme, you might pick that, and then you'd pick Garnier and some other ones that you'd want. I don't know the shampoo market very well. You'd pick the other brands that you thought were the main competitors. We can do counts on those to make sure the number of posts available in that country or that language is sufficient to analyze, and you can then go from there and use those as your comparative brands, and you can choose typically up to 12 is probably about the number, though that's normally more than you really want. But yeah, exploring a market, sticking to one market in one project is I guess what you have to do, and this works very well for research agencies who, you know, if they can work it, if they can get multiple clients in one market, they can, you know, they can obviously, you know, resell this data to a number of different people, so that there's an opportunity there. If you can have multiple clients in the same market, you can do very well at this as a research agency, certainly.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we have here now. I think that's all for today for the Q&A that we have. And then thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. And I'll give this back to Phil.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. If you've got any questions, you can see Nikki's email address there in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Feel free to send anything to her. She'll make sure that she either answers it and to answer it. Next week, we've got a really interesting webinar. It might be a different audience from today, but I would encourage people to come. We're looking at being able to automate reports in PDF or in file format. We are going to be covering the online delivery of reports in a couple of weeks' time on June the 10th. That's a separate webinar. But if you're interested in automating reports and generating reports and producing reports that are conditional and varied on the content of the data or the results from the data, and producing multiple reports, I think you'll find it a really interesting webinar. And we've got a really good guest speaker who's presenting that to us next week, who I think is an absolute genius at delivering this sort of stuff. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us today. I hope it's been an interesting. And if you want to know more about social listening, please get in touch with us and we'll do our best to help you. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.